Behind every success story, there is a long line of triumphs and defeats that remain hidden from others. These stories get condensed into journeys that minimize the struggle and wrap up with a happy ending. But we know that's not how life works. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about the challenges that Mark's guest faced and how they overcame adversity. Now, here is your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome back to another episode of From the Ashes. I'm Mark Azoulay, and I'm sitting here with Dr. Kurt Vonnegut to talk about mental health, and pediatric mental health in particular. Dr. Vonnegut, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be here.
So you've trained at Harvard Medical School. You've written multiple books on mental illness from different angles. And the first one was a memoir of your own experience. So on this show, we like to talk about the personal story first. So can you tell us a little bit about your From the Ashes story? What was that like for you?
It was in the 60s, and we all thought the world was, our parents and teachers literally didn't know what to tell us, because it seemed with the war in Vietnam and all the culture wars that, things were pretty catastrophic. And so I became a good hippie. I set up a commune in British Columbia. And that now seems crazy to me, but at the time it was one of the better career choices available. So when the world didn't end, then what we were people in our mid-20s without jobs. In there, and part of the story was I had a psychotic break, which was, I ended up in a hospital. At that time, my friends and I believed that mental illness was really a reasonable reaction to an unreasonable society. And there were lots of books telling us this. But for my friends to see me stop eating, stop sleeping, lose 25 pounds, hearing voices, acting in an uncontrolled way. And I think the final straw was when I took a huge rock and put it through an 8x12 picture window, because there wasn't enough oxygen in the air.
Yeah.
So they called my father and they took me to a hospital. It was very different than hospitals now, in that doctors really were in charge of when patients, were discharged, when they were well enough. And also it was very different because mental health care costs an awful lot less. At the time, I was in the hospital for 4 months, and that was about right for me to actually learn that I had an illness and how to deal with it. I think today people are in a week or 2 weeks, and they're discharged on a ton of medication because that works out best for the insurers. But I don't think people today are really taught about how to deal with bipolar disease or anything else that they happen to have. And at the time, that hospitalization cost $11,000, which I thought was the end of the world. I don't think you can get 12 hours in McLean Hospital for $11,000.
Yeah, that's a steal. That's a deal of a lifetime.
Right, but that's pretty, illustrative of what's happened to medical care in general. A hospital bed when I was an intern cost about $100. Now that same bed costs $4,000 a day. So I think the money involved has really, really changed medical care, and especially psychiatric behavioral health care, because it's a labor-intensive job. And insurers are not eager to pay for behavioral health, to say the least.
Yeah, and that's something that I know quite a bit working in my industry too. We'll definitely touch on that. Mm-hmm. But before we go that, I want to bring you back to the psychotic break incident and more about your story. There's something that I wrote down as you were talking, which is this idea that mental illness is a reasonable reaction to an unreasonable society.
Yeah.
I went to a alternative grad school called Naropa University, which was a Buddhist grad school over here in Boulder, Colorado. And I think that sentiment is there. I mean, there's a lot of hippies that still preach that. And I can say for me, I believed that too until I saw true mental illness. Right. It was something that from the outside looking in, I was like, yeah, like the system is corrupt. Everything is broken. Like everyone should be crazy. Right. Until seeing it being like, whoa, there's really a lot of suffering here.
Right.
You know, it's something that shouldn't be glorified in that particular way. I'm curious how your views changed on mental illness and as the culture developed and as you went through it yourself, what happened there?
Part of what I learned in the hospital and subsequently is that mental illness is really nobody's fault, and it's a biochemical, mess up, almost like any other disease. And this no shame, no blame. The other thing that I saw fairly quickly in my own case, that if my mental health was dependent on the mental health of my culture and community, I was cooked. Because we have to reasonably expect to live in the world as it is. And, you know, it's our society is not particularly well. I don't think it's necessarily sicker than it used to be, but thank God, the mental health of people with mental illness does not depend on the wellness of their society.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. So what inspired you to go back to medical school? How did you make that shift?
Well, as a hippie and realizing that the world wasn't going to end, and also realizing that our agenda to wipe out racism, war, poverty, was
all the big ones.
Was a little unrealistic. And if you were going to be of service and do any good in the world, it was going to be in smaller pieces. And so I had the hospitalization, and I said to myself, what would I have done if it hadn't been for the 60s and the war and all that? And I said, well, I was good at math. I was good at chess. I love science. I should have been a doctor. But at the age of 25, I no longer think 25 is too old for anything. I was like 4 or 5 years older than most medical school applicants, but I went back to school. I did well, and I got very lucky that, Harvard took me in. And I think they did it for variety. They wanted older students with different backgrounds. And I had written a couple of articles. So they were looking for variety. I am and was variety.
Mm-hmm. And did you study pediatrics then?
Yes.
Yeah.
You do the first 2 years of medical school are the science, and then you go into the hospitals and the clinics, and you act as a surgeon or a psychiatrist. You get to deliver a baby or two. And you get to find out what you like. And what I liked better than anything else was working with kids. I like their resilience, their sense of humor, the fact. I know probably as a psychotherapist, you can sit there with an adult for months before they'll tell you anything. You can play with a kid and find out what's going on in about an hour and a half.
Absolutely. Yeah. Early in my career, I worked in a Head Start preschool and did play therapy, and it's all there. It's all there.
Yeah. It's on the surface. And most of the time, kids get better and they're grateful. And, I love it. A kid will come in with a sprained ankle. I can guarantee he'll be better by the end of the week. Whereas if I go in and I sprain my ankle, I'm going to be doing physical therapy for the next 6 months. And if I'm lucky, Anyway, there are a lot of good reasons. And I like pediatricians more than I liked other doctors. I found them easier to work with. I say now that most pediatricians, they work longer and they look younger than they actually are, because they are, side effects of being around kids all the time it's good for your health.
Yeah, I'd imagine you bring play into your job, right? Because you have to talk with them on that level, because that's how they're experiencing the world.
Right. but that you can start anywhere. Like I can go into a room and say, nice sneakers. I mean, because that's starting a conversation. No, look, I say, not so bad yourself, doc. And I say, yeah, well, I have a 19-year-old at home, and he told me to get these Vans. And so, but you learn so much from as you know, for a conversation that starts anywhere. And I think teenagers, kids, it's all challenging, and it's always worth doing.
Yeah, that's really great. I'm curious what lessons you learned from working with kids for that long or being around them for that long. How have they impacted you?
They have taught me to not be able to guess what's going to be behind the door. I have to go through that door, whether it's going to be autism or drug addiction or a well kid who wants a physical so he can play football. It's my honor to be able to go through a door and say, how can I help you, and mean it. And, sometimes somebody, needs a new note. I said, my favorite thing is to sign working papers for kids. Yeah, I'll go get a job. Or notes for emotional support animals. So somebody can, an autistic kid can take their dog across. So it's the variety of what I see, and how I can try to mobilize resources or tell them, no, they don't really have a brain tumor or whatever. There's always something useful to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really fantastic, because you're working with them, like you said, when they're very pliable, when they're resilient, when they're excited, right? They're not like burnt out on life or entrenched in their patterns, right? There's a lot more flexibility, it sounds like, in the way that works.
There is an epidemic, there's no doubt, and the pandemic has made it worse, that anxiety and depression are through the roof. And these are things I didn't think as a pediatrician I would be diagnosing and treating. If somebody came in and had been cutting themselves, I'd call the psychiatrist, they'd see the psychiatrist within a few days. Now it's, you're on a waiting list for 6 months.
Yeah, tell me more about that. So in my practice, I work with a few Gen Z individuals. It sounds like you work a little bit younger sometimes, right? So like I said, Generation Alpha, I'm not sure what they're calling them right now. But I do see mental health does seem to be a much larger concern with them. What are you seeing on your end?
I'm seeing the same thing, and I'm prescribing, medications for anxiety and depression with kids that I just didn't expect this was going to be my role. I've since, I've taken courses. I've hired a psychopharmacology nurse, but I did not expect to be the main caretaker of kids with depression and anxiety. And I think kids are involved in a race to nowhere, where they are told that if they get good grades and work hard, everything is going to be fine. And kids are smarter than that. And I remember some disaster had happened somewhere, and I was driving my son to school. I have he's now 19, but he's been my wonderful refresher course. But I said, this is really awful. This isn't how I grew up. I'm sorry, that this, and my son absolutely deadpan says, "Welcome to my world, Dad." And,
wow.
in the world of somebody who is in high school or whatever, the kind of optimism, sometimes not really justified optimism, that I had growing up, that everything was going to be fine. If I wanted a good job, I could get a good job. That kind of certainty. I mean, kids are now looking around and saying, how am I going to make money? How am I going to be able to afford a house? And so the world does not look to them like they're going somewhere. But at the same time, they're from the age of 12 on or so are told they have to get straight A's. There are kids at 14 years old who are signing with colleges to be essentially professional hockey players. And it's just so much pressure. I have kids who get into college, 4-year scholarship, everything paid for, and they don't like the sport they're playing anymore. They are swimmers who say they don't want to be outboard motors. They're, tight ends, blocking ends who want to be thrown the ball once or twice. Or they go and they were the best athlete in their school and they sit on the bench for 4 years. So I think there's a lot of pressure and a lot of disappointment, and kids are much smarter than adults about how tough their lives are and are going to be.
I think that's very, very true. We'll probably talk about this in our second segment too. I feel like some part of the millennial generation, right? And we had this cynicism too, very similar thing. But I think, at least when I think about my peers, we were distracted, right? There was the advent of cartoons, advent of video games. Like, there's a lot of millennials that are still stuck in this nostalgia thing. But when I look at my Generation Z clients, some of their parents are millennials. So they're getting like second cynicism, where they can't really be distracted in the same way because their parents are also cynical. Yeah. Whereas I think the older generation had more of that optimism and had more of that, at least, or a sense of purpose and place in the world. And in their society, where my generation, we don't. And then we're raising kids that double don't, Right.
I'm glad my parents aren't around to see this. They were idealistic, optimistic, even though my father was called a black humorist. He was really, at the heart of it, an optimist and had a lot of the American dream. And so I said, I wish I'd lived a little longer, but not much beyond Obama. Thank you.
Yeah, not much to see the cynicism. This is a really fascinating topic. We're going to have to move into our first commercial break here. But when we come back, I want to hear more about your takes on this, about your experience in pediatrics, and to learn more about your book, which is called The Heart of Caring, that people can pick up if they're interested in reading. So if you're tuning in, hang out there for our commercial break, and we'll see you on the other side.
Become our friend on Facebook. Post your thoughts about our shows and network on our timeline. Visit facebook.com/Voice America.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Where can you listen to some of the world's top life coaches ready to dish out success tips and entrepreneurial guidance? The Voice America Empowerment Channel will do just that. Whether it's personal growth, building a better business, or inspirational life stories, make it a daily habit to tune into our programs. From weight loss and personal branding to law of attraction and increased happiness, you'll find it every day at VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com. The Voice America Empowerment Channel. It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed.
Our thoughts and feelings not only affect our own lives, but the lives of everyone around us. Find new meanings of love, authentic expressions, and better connections with the people in your life. Tune in to Love Light with Dr. Jean Marie Farish. This program will feature guests and discuss ideas that will bring a better life to you. When you find this perspective on love, it will change everything. Listen live every Friday at 12 noon Eastern Time and 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel.
It's your world. Motivate, change, succeed. VoiceAmericaEmpowerment.com.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
Welcome back to the show. So, Dr. Vonnegut, you're a success story, right? I mean, you went from, hippie commune, psychotic break, being in a mental hospital to going to Harvard Medical School, creating a successful career, publishing books. And we were talking during the break about how those stories are not often highlighted and sometimes even buried, where there's that stigma where people think that a mentally ill person is homeless or a murderer or a criminal or something, right? It's this whole other side, or should be locked up forever, right? There's all these things in movies and TV and sometimes from the, media that paint this picture. Can you talk more about your view on the stigma and what it was like for you to recover? I mean, to truly heal?
For me, I like the title of your show, From the Ashes. I mean, from my ashes were, being in a hospital, had shock treatment, which, by the way, it's not anybody's first choice, but all of these, it can help people. So I sort of worked myself up, and diagnostically, I think because I was so sick, I was diagnosed as being a schizophrenic. As I improved, I became a schizophrenic who might do well on lithium. When I at one point was called severe post-adolescent adjustment disorder. So and then, manic depressives have become bipolar. I mean, technically from my story, I'm definitely bipolar. And I have, and I think it's a blessing that when I'm well, I'm well. And when I'm sick, I'm not well. So I can't sort of skate around it. And I do think part of my recovery, it seemed to me, was to tell the truth about what I had been through. Because to me, not looking at it as just a medical illness like other medical illnesses was part of what kept people sick.
Yeah, I think that's true. I wonder about bipolar. I'm curious about your opinions on that, especially when it comes to medication, right? My assumption, and correct me on this, is that the medications are pretty effective. Mm-hmm. Yet the clients and the patients are often non-compliant because when they start to feel better, either they go off of it or they enjoy the mania component of it, so they don't want to take it because it feels like it kind of dumbs them down. Mm-hmm. Has that been your experience with trying to treat bipolar?
Yeah. And, I have this thing called a family where
being stable is pretty important for that, I've heard.
And these are things that like people don't talk about until I went through my own thing. I found out I was like the fourth generation of people who have been hospitalized or, almost or should have been hospitalized. It's a very common thing in the family, but it was a common thing nobody wanted to talk about. The medications, as I said, they do have side effects and they can be unpleasant, but not as unpleasant as being psychotic. And it is a struggle for somebody with bipolar disease to learn about the illness, to learn that the medications really help, to learn that the relapses are they're more and more painful. The first psychotic break, I was kind of excited. I was going to talk to God, learn the secrets of the universe. Yeah. And now if I get really tired or I just say, no. I never, ever, ever want to be sick like that again. So it goes, but people do have this feeling of excitement, and they have these romantic notions like about Van Gogh, that if they can be a little bit crazy, they're gonna write great novels and paint great paintings. So people are throwing their medicine away, and they don't write great novels and they don't paint great paintings. And I think I've come to believe that the relationship with art and mental illness is that painting and writing are things that help you not be unwell, and that creativity is part of recovery, for certainly for myself and for most recovered people I know.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience. So I don't have any mental health diagnoses, but I am a recovering drug addict, and I've been sober for about 10 years now. And a big part of my drug use was psychedelics and hallucinogens, which, touches into that psychotic realm.
Yeah.
And I remember feeling like I was a genius, right? I had that grandiosity that I was, like you said, beholding the multiverse, right? Seeing the secrets of the universe, really getting to the bottom of it, right? Like all these things. And I listened to and heard a lot of like the 60s literature, and that really spoke to me during that time in my life as well. And what I realized is what it did is, one, made me a lot harder to relate to, because I was thinking and talking about things that other people just were not living in that same reality. And two, made the rest of my life very gray, because I was comparing everything to this ecstatic state where it didn't create an addiction per se to that particular substance, but did create this longing and this kind of lack of fulfillment. And it wore out its welcome,
Yes. And I think that's what happens even with just simple anxiety for kids, is that Jack Daniels turns out to be a very good mood stabilizer until it isn't.
Yeah.
So these kids that are feeling completely miserable, they take a drink or narcotics and or almost anything, and they feel better. And so, but the downside, just like with psychosis, bipolar disease, whatever, the initial come on or whatever, you get, the downside is 10 times darker and worse than the feeling of getting in touch with the universe or whatever.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you is, really want to underscore it, is this idea that the other part of the stigma, which I think is not talked about, but I'm liking that you're talking about, is the glorification of mental illness. Like you said, that it makes you a great writer or a great painter or a visionary or a prophet or whatever, language you want to use for it. Because I think with people, specifically with bipolar, where there is that grandiosity component, that's incredibly attractive, right? I mean, who doesn't want to feel special and feel like they have secret knowledge and that they are creating the next great work? I mean, that's a very attractive story that creates a lot of pain.
Yeah. And in the morning, you look at the painting you made that was brilliant the night before. You look at these notes where what was really going to happen at the end of the world. And it's gibberish, but there is a serious thing. Like I can use my famous father, who was very, very sick from what he went through in World War II. But he used writing and art to be less lonely, to make other people less lonely. So I think a lot of great art comes from people struggling against the illness, but it doesn't come from going along with the illness. And so I think, severe mental illness, it's damaging. It's damaging.
Yeah, I don't know enough about your father's personal life. I've read a fair number of his books when I was in college. Did he struggle with bipolar too? Was this passed down genetically through that line? Or
like my sisters have said, and I say, he's not bipolar. I mean, he's not quite right, but we don't know what word to put on it. The actual bipolar gene came down from my mother's side. I think my father was maybe depressive, but at the age of 22, having a beautiful city bombed into ashes and then been recaptured and forced to go in and take hundreds and hundreds of corpses out of bombing shelters, he had big time PTSD and issues with alcohol or whatever, but he focused himself into, I always think it's creativity and it's being of service in a huge way. My father, when he was writing, was being of service, and that, whether it's addiction, alcohol, I think PTSD, telling your story and being of service is huge.
I think that's huge. I agree completely. I mean, I'm not currently in AA, right? But I did about 3 years of AA when I was in Pittsburgh, when I was in college and getting sober for an early sobriety. And that's the 12th step, right? Is go out there, be of service, make your story matter. Yeah. It's really how I framed it. Mm-hmm. And that has been healing. Part of my job is doing that and finding ways to express it.
Yeah, and I do. I talk about mental illness to medical schools. Mm-hmm. I wrote an article for JAMA, Journal of American Medicine, about recovery and service. And that, I think, is part of why I've been lucky enough to have, a profession, 3 handsome sons. I have a great life. I'm about to go get a new puppy.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
That's really cool. Yeah.
But so mental illness has not dominated my life, but I think a lot of what's been helpful is this notion of recovery and service.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. What message do you wish was out there about mental illness? What do you think would be a corrective message against the stigma?
That people get better. I mean, it's that simple. I think, the thing I can do to help, deal with the stigma is go to work every day. I'm tired now. I'm almost 75, so I want to go just a little bit less. But it's really showing up for life and being of service. I mean, that's part of. I've been in this community for 40 years. And I've been a soccer coach, and I can walk down the street and see little babies and say, "Hey, Dr. Mark," and I look at them, I say, "You got big."
Yeah.
So there's a lot of beauty in that, and I think if you can get doing almost any kind of positive service. I think, I had a ball coaching soccer. Maybe it's not for everybody, but whether it's, just doing positive stuff. And I really do think that there is, in medicine and life in general, connection with other people is healing. It's something we need. And I think it's something the pandemic has taken away from us, but I also think that technology was putting huge dents in that already.
I think that's very true. There's something, I forget who said it, some brighter than I did, that said, the antidote to depression is connection.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's been true in my life. The antidote to my addiction was connection. The antidote to a lot of things is connection and community, and that sense of belonging. Being a part of something bigger, knowing who I can depend on, knowing who's in my inner circle, in my corner, has been so critical to even just feel I have an inner circle, right? To feel like I do have a corner that people want to be in. Right. That was something that wasn't present in a lot of my early life. And now that I have it, I wouldn't let go of it for the world.
Right. One of the ways I look at medications is medications make it possible and to talk to other people, and talking to other people gives you a reason to take medication. So you get, and cleaning up your diet and exercise and all of these things work together. But basically, I think without connection, there's no healing, and without healing, there's no connection. That's one of the ways, I look at it with kids. So even just making connection, even if you don't have a magic pill, just that connection is very healing. We're social animals.
Yeah, we truly need each other.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about, now maybe we're getting on the hippie train a little bit of the sick culture, but
I'll go there.
Yeah, we'll go there. Yeah, but I think there is something around this, fierce individuality that I think the American culture really typifies. And, I work almost exclusively with men, and a big part of toxic masculinity is the idea that you don't need anybody, right? If you can't do it yourself, you're weak, something like that, right? There's a lot of these messages put up by your bootstraps that are, I think, meant to be empowering, but end up being very lonely for people, quite frankly.
Very, very lonely, right? Because the ultimate macho man is the Lone Ranger.
Right. Just him and his horse, right?
Right. I like the joke about Lone Ranger is surrounded by hostile Indians, and he says, "Well, Tonto, I guess we've had it." And Tonto says, "Who's we, white man?"
I like that one.
I think that loneliness is the core of a lot, and I think and connection is it's not just a hippie notion. Connection is necessary to healing, and healing is necessary to make it possible to connect.
Yeah, and I think with technology, I'm curious your views on it, being of the older generation too, and seeing more of the growth than I have. This idea of simulating connection, like in some ways, it makes connection in ways that you've never had. You can call someone in the other side of the world, right. But it's so close to being real, but it's not quite real, and I think the brain knows. I think on some level the brain knows that this isn't real.
Right. Friend is not a verb.
Right.
And I do think there is something that we've retreated. So we used to write letters, and that was very personal. And then we'd make real phone calls, voice to voice. And then we got to texting and emails, and texting when you were going to send an email or have a phone call. People are having relationships and then breaking up by text, So yeah, I think it's very damaging. And there are girls who go to sleep, sorry to be sexist, with the phone on their pillow about who likes who, and they don't sleep, and they get anxious and depressed about what their friends are telling them.
Yeah, and there's some great books as a researcher, you probably know him, Jonathan Haidt, who talks about children and mental health and the advent of the phone and body image dysmorphia and, lack of self-worth and all this stuff, right? It's this constant comparison. And, it's like, as a millennial, I remember a time without that, but I do worry about, Gen Z is who I have more access to in my practice, that like they were born in it. And again, I've talked before, like many of their parents, my generation, are still stuck in it, right? So like their parents are stuck in it, and then they're double stuck in it. It's something to really think about. So we're going to move into our final segment here. I'm going to move to a commercial break. In this final segment, we'll talk directly to the listeners. So if you're listening and you want to hear some Dr. Mark Vonnegut suggestions, advice, things if you're relating to this conversation, stay tuned, and we'll catch you on the other side.
Follow us on Twitter at VoiceAmericaTRN. Get the lowdown on guests, new shows, and your favorites. That's VoiceAmericaTRN.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY www.teachable.com.
Voice America programs are now available on your favorite connected device, including Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home. Through streams with Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, listening to your favorite show is as easy as saying the show name followed by the word podcast.
Hey, Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast.
If that doesn't work, try adding on TuneIn or on iHeartRadio or on Apple Podcasts.
Are you ready to move to your next level? Listen for Empowering Women, Transforming Lives with host Rebecca Hall-Greider. Each show will focus on a central topic with discussion, guests, and your questions being featured. Our show is perfect for women who feel a call in their heart to step out in a bigger, more powerful way in their life and just need some encouragement, inspiration, and practical steps to support them on their journey. Empowering Women, Transforming Lives can be heard live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, with a replay of the show Sunday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time and 4 p.m. Eastern on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Get the news on our shows and other happenings by following us on Twitter. Find us at Voice America TRN or twitter.com/Voice America TRN.
You are listening to From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay. To reach the show today, please call 1-888-346-9141. That's 1-888-346-9141. Or send an email to podcast@mark-azoulay.com. Now, back to From the Ashes.
So we were talking during the break about how some of these things that you're seeing in children are new. You mentioned cutting, eating disorders, an increase in autism. Can you say more about that? Because the narrative that I've been told is that, the medical system is just better at diagnosing, or people are talking about it more. But I'm curious to hear your side of it and what you've noticed out there in your practice.
I think probably there was always some of the eating disorders and self-harm and autism, but it's very real that there's a lot more of autism, whether it's something in the environment or I see what helps autistic kids, and some of them can do very, very well. And I love my autistic patients who can, there are some who have no language, and that's much more tragic. But anyway, we used to just call them atypical children, but autistic, I think part of it is there must be a chemical or something in the environment, but there also is these kids their parents aren't able to be there for them as much. ABA is applied behavioral analysis, where a therapist really confronts the child and doesn't let them go into their own little world. So I think there are different kinds of autism. Cutting and stuff is a little more, I'm sure that when I was growing up, kids weren't making these careful little cuts on their arms. And that is partly, social, because you go online, people are making cuts, people are telling you how to be anorectic, people are, as social animals, we want to do what our friends and family and other people are doing. And a lot of what of the behavioral stuff, including substance abuse, I grew up in the 50s on Cape Cod, and I knew there was a town drunk, and I knew there was, but these things were not in your face all the time. And I think with social media, kids can connect and sort of reflect their own pathology, be it self-harm or drugs or eating disorders. You can give a 15-second clip on TikTok, and kids they see what they want to see, but a lot of it is very, very, very harmful. And I do think there are new influences like the social media, and there are essentially new diseases like the epidemics of cutting. Life is new. There are new things we have to deal with, some of which are very, very harmful to our mental health.
Yeah. So when a child walks into your office and has some of these behaviors, or when a parent does, what do you tell them? Where do you start?
I think with kids, the first thing to let them know is that they are not the only ones, that they're, if an anxious 13-year-old who is afraid to go out of the house or go to school is convinced that they are the only 13-year-old who has ever felt that way. So job one, tell them that they're not the only one. Job two is to tell them there are a lot of things that they can do to get better. And if they, and sometimes I ask, and it's a question for other, addictive medicine is, what are you willing to do? Do you want your life to get better? What are you willing to do to get it that way? And then I can lay out, it's not nothing is the whole answer, but if you, clean up your diet, walk 2 miles a day, get off your screens, talk to your parents. If you can't talk to your parents, I have therapists here. You can talk to your therapist, and just sort of, you are one of many anxious children, and you can and will probably get better. And also you warn them. I warn them about sort of false cures like alcohol and narcotics.
Yeah, so it sounds like it goes back to that community piece we were talking about before, is knowing that they belong, that there's nothing weird or strange about them, and that there are resources available. And some of the stuff is simple. It can be difficult, but it's simple. There's nothing crazy that really needs to happen.
And there are improvements. I would, I would say like 40 years ago, the sort of the shame and the stigma of being gay, and that's really, really gone. And when a kid comes in and says, Dr. Vonnegut, I have something I wanted to tell you, and they say, I'm gay. And part of me wants to say, I knew that when you were about 12, but also, the part of me says, is that all?
Right.
Say, look at this. You get better clothes, more money, better parties. I mean, there's a lot of advantages, but it's just that the seriousness of that as a problem is completely changed. And I think we can change the loneliness of anxiety and depression, and
Yeah, so I don't have to overcome this giant resistance to jump over this wall to, come out, right? Or come out as having a mental illness, or come out as being, having an eating disorder. That it can be like, not a problem. If you want to change it, here's how to change it,
And that's why I wrote the second book about, I'm just like someone without mental illness, only more so. And just sort of saying that, you're not alone. And there's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of ways to connect with other people, be it a therapist or your friends or whatever. I think all connection is good.
Yeah, I think that's just the theme we keep hitting on.
Yeah.
So how would you encourage a parent? What would a parent do if they're noticing some of these behaviors in their children?
To be able to be honest. I mean, I've tried a lot of different things. One thing I've had some luck with is asking parents to talk to their own parents about what they were like as kids, to try to bring the parents sort of back into being able to identify and be more of a peer, not that you're not still a parent, but to have some identification if you learn what you were like as a child, and doing all the same the same things that I talked about before is, you're not alone. You're not the only person that ever felt this way. There's a lot of good things, and you can go through the diet, the exercise, medication, therapy. You say, I got, pick one or two. I've got 5 good things you could do, and you can come back in 2 weeks and tell me what worked.
Yeah, I think the thing that I would add when I work with parents too is helping them, without judgment, of course, understanding like the systemic lens, right? That hopefully not identifying their kid as the problem child or as the identified patient or as the one that's broken, but looking at, hey, what's going on in the whole household? And yeah, as a parent, you have a role in that. It's not your fault, but you have a role in that, right? There is genetic components, but these things don't come out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's fun to just say you could try therapy yourself and just see what kind of.
Oh, they hate it. They hate that.
No, some of them will say I could probably use it. Okay. I agree. Most of the time, they're horrified. Part of my plan when I'm negotiating with kids, especially if it's substances and behavior involved, I'll make it sort of a deal. You're going to do this, you're going to do that. You're going to stop swearing at your mother. And, I'm going to tell your mother that she's got to stop bugging you. And kids, finally. And so part of the treatment plan is the parents have to stop bugging the kid. He's 14, you've done what you can in terms of character. So I do. I say, and then when the parents come back in, and I say, well, part of the plan here is you've got to stop coaching your kid. I don't usually tell them to stop bugging.
You got to stop being so annoying to your kid.
Right. And so the kids will buy in to the rest of what I wanted them to do.
Yeah. Because they're still in that transitionary stage where they need another adult to say it to their parents. Right. And they might say it in their own way, but it's not going to be effective. And the parent probably needs another adult to say it to them. Right. And that's the model that I think really works. It's really going to that, systemic level and trying to see all those things that are happening and to try to make changes on the family unit level to help support the child.
Pick out 10 things you do for your child and do one less.
Yeah, there you go. Just give a little bit of space. Let them figure it out on their own. So yeah, as we're wrapping up here, can you tell us a little bit about the book? Like, what's in it? What do you go over there?
It's the story of medical care as much as anything else, and medical care is mostly taking care of patients. So I tell the story as with patients. Like my first patient as an intern, poor girl from Cape Verde, arrived with a note on her chest that says, I have cancer, take me to Mass General. Kid got world-class care, and we often gave away care when it was the appropriate thing to do, because the mission of medical care is that people who need care get it. And how that has changed to I'm writing notes to insurance companies that Maggie still has no left leg. And I think a lot of the time, once the insurers are sort of in control, they don't want to pay for some, and they're businessmen. I understand that they don't want to spend money, but I also understand that my patients, the ones who need wheelchairs. They're not faking it. Yeah. And I think so. The book tries, along with my cute kids who are, I tell them they have to pee in a cup and they ask me what's wrong with my bathroom. But there is the seriousness of how care has become less and less available. And you see a doctor you've never seen before and never going to see again. And his motivation to connect with you and help is minimal because he's been told he has to see 6 patients an hour.
Right. It's not incentivized. Yeah. Right. It's a really great topic, especially with, the pandemic and the healthcare crisis that I think has really been illuminated. Yeah. So as we're wrapping up here, Dr. Vonnegut, where can people find you online? Where, if they want to learn more about you, learn about your books, where are you out there?
As of last week, I actually have a website.
There you go. Perfect timing.
I think it's Mark Vonnegut. I'm actually not sure what it is, but I think you can probably find it. And also, there is a website for my my practice, which is Mark Vonnegut Pediatrics. But the really helpful thing you can do right now is go to Amazon, Barnes Noble, or your local bookstore, and buy my book. And sometimes I tell people, buy 2 or 3 in case you misplaced the first one.
Stock up on them. So the book again.
So I do, I feel very positive about having written the book, because I have felt that my patients and other doctors aren't going to have the kind of opportunities for care and stuff that I've had. And so a lot of the tragedy in mental health in kids is the care's not there. Yeah. 6 months to see a psychiatrist, 3 months to find a therapist, to see it. It's just sad and a lost opportunity that the care is not there.
Yeah. Again, really important topic. If you're listening, check it out. The book again is called The Heart of Caring: A Life in Pediatrics by Dr. Mark Vonnegut. Thanks, Dr. Vonnegut, for joining the show. It was great to talk to you. Really fun conversation. And for those listening out there, tune in next time. We'll see you another episode of From the Ashes coming out in a week.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azoulay on From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Meet triumph and defeat, and treat those 2 imposters the same.